meeting of the Rhode Marine Fisheries Council to order. My name is Molly Moran Ogren. I have the honor of serving as chair of the council on behalf of RITM Director Terrence Gray. We have a quorum, we have an agenda. Are there any recommended changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved by consent. The next item is the meeting minutes from October 2nd, 2023. Are there any recommended changes to the minutes as noted? Hearing no objections, the minutes are approved by consent. The next item on the agenda is public comment on any matters not in tonight's agenda. If so, please raise your hand. Anything from Zoom? All good? Okay. Seeing no hands, we'll move on to the first agenda item. And we're going to revisit the Providence River Shellfish Management Area harvest schedule. I'm just going to note that we're going to be doing this a little bit differently tonight. So we're going to be reviewing the sizes first as usual. We were going to go to the department to weigh in. And then we'll go division of departments. And then we'll go to the council for questions and commentary. And then I'm going to go to the public. Traditionally, this goes to the Shellfish Advisory Panel, but based on timelines, it did not get put on that schedule. So I will take public comment on this first for the council to hear and deliberate on. And only then, when the public has finished, I'll look for a motion. I'm just going to know if we've heard both sides of it ad nauseum. I might cut off commentary if it starts to get a bit long. I want to make sure everyone does get heard though. But if it does start to become a little bit belabored on the 2 points, then I will probably cut it off and then look for a motion. Does that work for everybody else? All right. So with that, let's turn it over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll walk us through this based on the discussion we had back in October and where we are at today. So, as you remember, on October 3rd, the council put forth a recommendation to the director, of which was how to best use, if at all, the 3 days that weren't optimized or realized from the Providence River schedule due to rain of this current year. What followed was we took an industry proposal that had not gone to staff, but had been discussed among members of the industry. We brought it forth here for consideration for the council. Members of the public spoke to the motion. We voted on it. You all voted on it. The director agreed with your recommendation. It was promulgated. The challenge was that, as written, the language indicated a regulation that was different from what the intent of the original proposal was. Ultimately, there was a desire to effectively have, in the scenario that we ended up in, 3 days, two going December, one going January, but as written, the recommendation and ultimately rule dictated all 3 days go to January 2024. What that not only was that not the intent of the original proposer, or I believe as a result of the council, but I'm bringing it here before you today. But also there's been serious concerns raised about having 3 days potentially open back to back in January for the Providence River on top of a Greenwich Bay schedule in January. So there's been concern about what that will do for the market in January, and thus we brought forth a couple of options for you to consider based on the feedback we got. When the rule was promulgated and noticed and on file, it was at that time that the members of the public and the industry and the original proposers were concerned as that it's written, and at that time there was not time to have then another SAP to then have you all discussed before December 4th. So unfortunately, we're back in a very similar scenario we were in October 3rd based on the regulations and timing of everything. But we wanted to bring this issue back forth to you based on the level of concern we've had from the industry on 3 days effectively or potentially open back to back in January. So I'll quickly walk through what we've heard from the public so far effectively in the last 2 weeks on the topic. So we've heard the first one here is basically instead of having the days in January, in hindsight, don't have any days between January and April. And any days that you that would have been, that weren't realized, but could have been realized now in this period, consider those in future proposals for the larger part of 2024. The proposal number 2, it actually speaks to using one of those days a month, so January, February, and March, on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So, and I'll go to the next slide in a second, but really just highlighting here, in an effort to try and spread the days out and have minimal market concerns, but also have that day open for the fishery. This is, I understand the intent of the proposal put forth. If you could go to the next slide really quick. I just want to show this one too, because this was another one we got a week ago, but then was rescinded. Very similar in nature, except just a bit more buffering around ending or beginning of months to ensure that there aren't back-to-back days open of the river in the winter. So you can go back, Nicole. I really wanted to just show those 3 because full transparency, there has not been a SAP, and that's the feedback that the division has gotten to this point on the matter. So up for the council's decision today, they can leave the 3 days in January, which is, probably not advisable based on the public comment, but that's an option. They can rescind the 3 days and have them be discussed in further future management with SAP consideration, or there's an option that use the days in January, February, and March, which I must say is somewhat similar to one of the options that was proposed originally last October. So, for example, back on October 3rd, there was a proposal that there were 5 days, one of them would have gone each month, with 2 in December. So this kind of mimics that 5-day option, but effectively there's whether to use the days or not use the days in the winter of 2024. So I'll stop there and answer any questions the council may have about process or.
Does the division have any recommendation or any preferred option?
There's no biological difference in any of these. I think one of the appealing option thoughts was to see how the market would respond in the winter. There was the number of the SAP discussions talked about the efficacy of that. So that I think back on October 3rd, that was part of the division's support for moving forward to test that. It seems as though it seems that there's an increased concern in the last 2 weeks than there was in October when we had that discussion. So I think this is, in terms of a process point, that this is really highlighted is the SAP worked pretty well in getting recommendations, at least a nice think tank session, if you will, even with multiple proposals that they come forward. So I think that this will be, I would imagine, the heart of many discussions moving forward in future years, but the division can manage either of these, and we'll work with enforcement if it is open, but I can't really speak to the economic nature that may or may not be may occur when if it's open. So that's helpful.
Is there any way from enforcement on preference or non-students?
We don't have any preference that time. You're
Any other questions from the council? Just actually one more question. So 3 days could be rolled over into the May to October season of 2024, correct?
The way I would phrase it is that if we don't use those 3 days, that will be used to inform our decision. Because in a scenario where, let's just say, we recommend 18 days or something, and then a comment vote recommends 30. I wouldn't say 30 plus 3, in terms of that disparity. So we would use that to inform it based on what we thought last year. I mean, last year we recommended 14 days and the council voted 18, but our honoring of the 3 were in the spirit of what the council had intended for back in May. So I don't know if it would be linear in that sense, just +3, especially if there's a decision in April or such to say, now we want 2 days and more days, like it wouldn't necessarily equate, as a 3+, but it would definitely be used. And I guess more risk tolerant proposal from the division based on the 3 not realized.
Any other questions from the council? So I will do. Are there any hands raised already on Zoom? Okay. So I'll go to the public at this time for thoughts on proposals. And I'll start with hands raised. So, go ahead.
Ken Murgo, commercial fisherman, annual stat number. I support issue proposal 2. I've heard extensively from guys in my area on the east side of the bay who want some access to the Providence River in the winter. I understand the market concerns, but I like this proposal because it spreads the days out, so it limits what could go wrong. And to what Connor said, I think using these extra days from this year is a good test. See how it goes, and maybe it goes terribly, and then when we go to plan for 2024, now we know. I don't see it as a huge risk. It's 3 extra days we're rolling over. I think it's a good way to see it. It could be viable. Guys really need the shot in the arm that time of year. It's a very, very slow time of year. So that would be a boon to many fishermen. So that's why I support proposal 2.
Well, Connor did a good job of explaining why we're here tonight. And basically it was inartful language that was put forward that made the schedule that DEM put out untenable. So we definitely support not having the 3 days of January. That was not our intent, or it would be a good thing for the market. Actually, we did both industry 1 and 2 in our proposals. Our membership voted if we had extra days, we were hoping to use 2 in December. If there was any more, go into the winter for a lot of things that Mr. Murgo mentioned to see what happened and just kind of get an idea what the production and how many people show up. And we were moving forward with that language. What happened was Brennan from Mars, who there was no SAT meeting, so he was not there, and the membership meeting he couldn't attend, really has an issue with the production at that time. And we understand that because it runs concurrent, as Connor said, with the Greenwich Bay management area. Last October, I mentioned how the disparity between the East Bay and the West Bay is really becoming more apparent with this area. The West Bay guys have the Greenwich Bay management area, and it's a solid program, 3 days a week that we've had since 1982. And it really gets the industry and the West Bay guys a safe place to work 3 days a week. And the concern that was raised was that an opening like this that puts so much clams on a already soft market at that time of year would just devastate the price, and it would follow through for most of the winter. So for a full-time guy that goes to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they certainly would enjoy the Area E opening, but so would all the part-timers that only show up when this area opens. And I don't know if Connor has any numbers on that, but it's got to be 50 or 60% of the fishermen only show up when this area is open. So the board, we ran it by all my board members, and basically they all agreed that the concern, the potential negatives that this could create were not worth it, even though we shared some of Mr. Murgo's thoughts on seeing what would happen. So we asked that, those 3, we don't want to lose the 3 days, and that's really this whole issue has been a conundrum. We have a beautiful resource, but it's just very difficult to try to manage on a half-inch rain. And if I know you can't guarantee it, Connor, I know that's not part of the process, but we just don't want to lose those 3 days because we only had 15, in an area that's the best area in the day, that's really, it's been tremendous. So we support industry proposal 1 for our concerns that have been raised. And the long-term effect, or at least the winter time for those that work the winter. Cause the guys that show free, more than half will just show up that day, dress warm, you know, and then they'll go back to whatever they do all those other days. Where we're gonna have to hop in the boat the next day, and Greenwich and this area run concurrently, they're the same time at a half-inch rain. So E will be open when Greenwich is. And E closes, Greenwich is open either the next day or the next day, depending on what happens. So it's really been a difficult decision, but we support industry proposal. The best way, I guess, to describe it is the doctor's mantra, you know, do no harm. And that's kind of where we're at right now, as much as we really like to utilize this place and find out what happens this time of year, it's just too worrisome to move forward, and to SAP be able to discuss this, you know, and go through the normal process when we talk about next year's schedule. So I'll stop there.
So just to clarify, proposal one.
Industry proposal one.
I just remind people to try to speak up for people on Zoom. They're having a little bit of trouble hearing some of
I don't think, Mike, it was you. All right, is there any other hands, any other commentary from in? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brennan. I'm with my seafood. We buy at Rhode. Just to touch on what Mike was saying. With the market in that time of year, it's just horrendous as it is. What I was trying to tell everyone when we were talking about this fucking Scup is, again, you have Greenwich opening at the same time that the river is opening. So there's a lot of product coming in all at once. And with a lot of companies that I'm sure East Bay dealers deal with as well, they want no later than a 5-day harvest date. So product sits, you know, for 2 or 3 days. By the time it's shipped out, you know, a lot of companies aren't gonna want it. So the dates become a problem. And I really think that it would change the entire market price as a whole. So New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Maine, it'll change their prices because we're dumping so much product at a lower price just to get rid of it. It will change the market entirely. And that wouldn't be 1 day, 2 day, that's 3 to 4 weeks, and then it opens up again. So the price will continue to stay down. So that's just where I see that happening.
Great, thank you. Is there any commentary on Zoom? No answers? Okay. Oh, okay.
Jim Boyd, from Providence Shellfish Association. I support what Mike has put forth, and that him on the board. We support industry proposal one. I'll remind the council, we only got 15 of the 18 days allotted during the season this year for the Providence River. We do, however, have 3 days that are scheduled in December, provided we don't get a half inch or more rainfall between now and December 31st. So if everything is fairly dry in December, we'll get 3 Providence River days plus Greenwich Bay, which is also closes on a half inch of rainfall like the Providence River. So if Providence River is open, we're going to have Greenwich Bay as well. So there will be a lot of product in the marketplace leading up to the Christmas holidays. And we do want to preserve, if we can, those 3 days that we didn't get out of the 18. We only got the 15, but we'd like to be able to use those in 2024. And I'm certain that that will be part of discussions with the Shellfish Advisory Panel in early 2024 as we look forward to the Providence River schedule. So in short, we're supporting proposal number 1. Our brothers on the east side of the bay, I know they want to see some openings in January, February, and March, but given what we've heard from the dealers on our side of the bay, that's going to really depress the price. And as Mike explained, those of us who are out there on a full-time basis, we're gonna take a hit on the price, and economic hit. I was out there today along with a number of other guys. At best, there were 40 guys out there today. If the Providence River was open today, we would have seen 90 or 100 guys. Any given day in the open day, you're only gonna see 30 or 40 guys working. So Mike pointed out to, that the part-timers are taking advantage of the Providence River because of one day opening. And, they make a little hit on income and go back to what they do and stay warm with whatever jobs they're doing, while we're suffering the economic, consequences here.
Okay, great. I'm gonna, seeing no other hands in the crowd, I'm gonna look to Zoom one more time.
Jerry's iPad, Jerry Shea, you put a comment in the chat. Would you like to make a comment? If so, please raise your hand.
Nothing. He didn't write anything in.
He did, but we're kind of
So we do,
comments
yeah.
via chat only by raising your hand.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so with that, I'm gonna close any further public comment on this matter. And I'm going to look to my council members to make a motion, right?
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to adopt industry proposal number 1.
Okay, do we have a second? Seconded by Dave Bethany. That was moved by Mike Bright, Dr. Mike Bryce, and seconded by Dave Bethany. Is there any discussion or questions on the motion?
Actually, I have a question. I probably should have asked it before. That's okay. So for the timing of all this, so if you don't get the days in December, all days because of the weather, and as the staff meets again in early 2024, is there a chance to revisit this, or if we vote that no days can be added till April, that's the way it has to stand?
Yeah, go ahead, Connie.
Good question, Dave. So, like I said, let's say we wanted to have this go to the SAP, have it done through that process. You have a SAP meeting, but you'd also then need to have a council meeting. You as a body would have to reconvene and then provide a recommendation to the director, assuming that was aligned. It's 30 days, 20 days until then rule propagation thereafter. So let's say the SAP met tomorrow, and then you all met again Thursday. You could conceivably have something in effect by early January, but without that kind of crunch timeline, those are the steps you have to do. I would say if the council wanted to try and move forward with something in the winter, it would behoove us to actually have a SAP to give us formal recommendations. I think that's part of the hiccup we've had in the last couple of rounds here. So, which we'll rectify as a division and program. But I think that's probably the best. That would be the steps you have to take. Right now, the council's slated to meet early April, I would say, to set specs and for next year's Providence River schedule, as well as other rec fisheries topics. So,
okay. Any other questions or comments on the motion to recommend the director industry proposal 1? Okay, are we all ready for the question? All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of industry proposal 1 for the shellfish harvest schedule for the Providence River Shellfish Management Area Conditional Area E as proposed, please raise your hands. So we have one, Travis Barrow in favor, Mike Rice in favor, Dave Bethany in favor, 1, 2, 3, 4, and Mike Flounder in favor. So 4, all those against? Katie Egan, Andy D'Angelo, and Greg Besby against. 3. So the motion passes 4-3. Okay. So the next items before you are proposed amendments that were posted for public notice on October 23rd, 2023. They were heard on November 6th at a public hearing and closed. Comments were closed on November 22nd, 2023. The best way to proceed for these items, I'm sure you've all heard this spiel, I'm going to say it again. These have already been publicly noticed, and we'll have the Division of Marine Fisheries present on the proposed changes and weigh in on the impact of those. The council will be afforded time for questions and commentary, and then I will look to the council to make a motion on each item in the form of a recommendation to the director. Since these have already been heard and responded to through public comment, the council will not take input from the public tonight unless any member of the council wishes to incorporate any additional comments from the public. Any additional comments will be limited to nuance or items that haven't already been discussed through the record. This should only reflect notions that are outside of previous testimony. I will only take testimony that is limited one proposal in favor and one against. If you have already sent in your written comment or spoke at the public hearing, those are reflected in the e-packet that the council members have. So please refrain from just reiterating what's already been stated in previous commentary. All right, so for the first item, we have section 1.8 possession limits and vessel operating compliance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're mixing up a little bit tonight. We're going to go through this part one first instead of doing it at the end when everyone's glazing over. These are all meant to be non-substantial changes, things just to make the regulations more cohesive and read better. The first one is our desire to clarify that all possession limits are 1 per person per vessel per day or alternate period specified in rule. Our current regulation doesn't read very well. It mentions unless an alternate period of time is specifically provided in the governing regulation. That is proven to be unclear. We get a lot of questions on that, so we've rewritten it to make it very clear that you are allowed 1 possession limit per specified time period, and then we list examples of the ones that we currently manage. We did get some concern once we put this out to notice that it might go contrary to some of our fisheries that allow more than 1 possession limit on board a vessel if there are more than 1 licensed person. So we did make a provision for that. At the end, you'll see the bottom where we say unless authorized elsewhere in this subchapter. And that would address any concerns from either Cohog or the Menhaden fisheries.
Is there any council questions or commentary? Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt the cleaned up language notification.
Seconded by Mike Wright. Connor?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So Travis, just to clarify, it's the revised proposed right from the division? Okay, thank you.
Is there any other further discussion or commentary? All right, are all those in favor to recommend to the director the adoption of the revised language as proposed for possession limit and vessel operating compliance in general? Please raise your hand. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, the next item we have is the proposed rule of transiting. Go ahead.
So this one is for party charter vessel reporting requirements. So basically we have not altered the language at all, and this also mirrors the NOAA federal rule. We're just moving it because this language was in a commercial section, not in a section specific to party charter fishing.
Any questions? I will look for a motion. Mike Rice?
Motion to move this.
Seconded by Andy D'Angelo. Is there any commentary? All, if you're ready for the question, all those in favor of adopting the division proposal for the possession limit vessel operating compliance party charter vessel reporting requirements, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion passes unanimously. We're going to move on to the marine life management area description.
So for this one, it's a vessel operating commercially. So this one, we found two passages that are very redundant. You'll find, so we're proposing to delete section 1.8 D4 and 1.8 D6. You'll find that 1.8 D3 is very similar, almost identical to number 6. And you'll find that number 4 is actually, it just addresses the rod and reel fleet, whereas 1.8 D5 allows the same provision for all vessels operating commercially with a crew. So these are redundant, there's no need for them. In fact, they're a little confusing. So we're proposing to eliminate.
I just want to clarify, I actually said the wrong titles. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page and it's on 1.8. I just want to make sure that we all have that clarification. Okay, cool. Is there any questions or commentary from the council? Do I have a motion? Andy, or Travis Barrett?
Yeah, motion to delete the confusing verbiage here.
We have a seconded by Katie Egan. Any discussion? All those in favor of deleting the confusing language as proposed by the division in the vessel, thank you. Possession limit vessel operating compliant vessels operating commercially, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, okay. Voted unanimously. On to the next item.
So the next one is, once again, we're in part 1, and this is moving. So we get two things going on here. First is we'll do the EEZ clarification. So we have the language below there about official fishing, vessel fishing in the exclusive economic zone and possession of regulated species must adhere to all applicable rules, regulations, governing commercial fishing operation, including not limited to season possession limits, offloading gears, stowage requirements, and reporting and record keeping. So this should be a rule that goes into our part 1, which is for general provisions applying to all aspects of our regulations. Currently, it only exists in part 23, which is for our aggregate programs. We put it there initially to remind folks that you do have to follow federal rules while fishing aggregately. However, it does makes much more sense to have it for all of our, to apply to all of our rules.
Is there any questions? Commentary? Do I have a motion? I might need one.
Yeah. Move to approve the division proposal to move content.
Made by Mike Rice, seconded by Andy D'Angelo. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor to recommend to the director adoption language as proposed for clarifications to transiting. You guys are ahead of me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Voted unanimously. Speedy today.
If we could go back to the previous slide really quick, although we don't have so the next one's for stowage of net requirements. We don't have all the regulation verbiage on the screen. It's actually quite extensive, but basically what we're doing here is updating the language to be consistent with the federal rules on how you stow your nets or gear when transitioning a closed area. So that's what we're doing in this.
Is there any questions on those matters? Katie, go ahead.
Make the motion
To adopt
the federal rules.
Seconded by. And Travis Barrow. Is there any discussion or commentary on adopting the federal rules? All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of the language as proposed for clarifications to transiting stowage of nets, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, voted unanimously, 7-0. Okay, marine life management area.
All right, so this one I think you guys will be quite pleased with, actually. So it's a proposal to improve the readability and improve access to location landmarks via a link to Google Maps. So what we've done is we have relocated the lats and longs of landmarks from within area descriptions of all of our area management areas into a table for improved readability. Before you had to go through it in paragraph form, it's quite difficult. We also have links to Google Maps. So if you have any questions about what a given management area looks like, you can click the link and there it is, pictures worth 1,000 words.
As a, just as a note, when I was a young intern and I was doing mapping for Rhode Island, your regulations with the paragraphs were awful. So I'm very excited about this, if I can show preference for this one. Is there any other commentary or discussion? Do I have a motion? Mike, right?
I move that the state regulations move into the 21st century.
Seconded by Andy D'Angelo. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of the language as proposed for shellfish marine life management area descriptions? All in favor, unanimously, motion passes.
And then finally, the last one here, as you notice in the e-packet, we do go through and make minor changes to words to make it read better. So those are all in there. This just improves readability of the regulation, not intended to have any changes to it.
I might take this one as a vote. If there's any or consent, is there any questions or commentary? All those in favor of approving non-substantive clarifications to this section, please raise your hands. Voted unanimously. Voted by consent or approved by consent. Thank you, Joe.
So now we're on to part 3, kind of the more meaty items on the agenda tonight. First is concerning commercial scup management. These regulations govern the season, sub-period allocation, and starting possession limit. We have 2 proposals here. We have a division proposal, which would change the starting possession limit for the general category from unlimited to 10,000 pounds per vessel week. And then we have an industry proposal as well that would change that start from unlimited to 20,000 pounds per vessel.
Go ahead, Connor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So as you may remember, or for those who weren't on the council at that time, we historically have had the general category be 10,000 pounds per vessel per week for scup possession limits. There was an industry proposal last year to move from that to unlimited. And by way of background, we have possession limit authority, so we're doing in-season management of possession limits for quote utilization and such. Regardless, but we will typically, we'll start each year with proposals on how to move forward with starting possession limits for given periods. So last year, the council recommended unlimited based on the industry proposal. The director accepted it and promulgated the rule. About 2 days before we opened, so it must have been April 30th or 29th, we got a lot. We got lots and lots of industry calls about moving from a 10,000 pound per vessel per week to an unlimited. The market responded to that, and the price was dropping. As we were speaking on the phone. Luckily, the 2 days that we were open before we could legally change possession limits because of the 48-hour public noticing, it wasn't really fishable weather. So there wasn't any market concerns, but at that time, it was stressed to us by a number of dealers and commercial harvesters from all walks of Rhode Island that the possession limit is really crucial in trying to help set the market price for scup, particularly in the year last year where it seemed, at least from talking with industry members, pretty plentiful. So trying to help kind of stabilize a commercial market. We don't see the same with the floating fish trap, but in the general category, that seemed to dictate quite a bit onto what the price was going to be for scup. So what we did was we went back this year and effectively proposed what we had the previous year of 10,000 pounds per vessel per week. We did get an industry proposal of 20,000 pounds, so I guess in theory closer to that unlimited mark, but just a bit larger. The division doesn't have a specific preference for 10,000 or 20,000. Again, we will manage the quota, manage the possession limit in season like we would normally if it seemed utilization rates were too high and we weren't going to make it to the end of the year, or we would seek for quota transfers if we could. But yeah, that's just by way of background as to why we're here. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or commentary?
Connor, so we were at 10,000 and then we went to unlimited, but then everyone's kind of panicked. What amounts were they anticipating would be coming in? Like, because now we're back to an option for 20,000. Would that cause the same amount of hate and discontent and crisis that with unlimited did?
I would look to the members of the council to shed light on that. I have never sold squid, so I don't, or Scup, so I don't know. But, I would think that, I don't know the answer to that, quite honestly.
Get answer Greg's question, at 20,000 pounds, with the fish being in the shore, with market price leave quickly. They're off working on less volume with more price. Biggest problem we have is the side. Eventually, down the road, the side they increase more for discard medium, not bringing them that fish will there one.
Thank you.
I can entertain more commentary or a motion.
I can make a motion to accept the proposal one.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Andy D'Angelo. Sorry, I just, my head was turned. Is there any further commentary on this? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 1 for commercial Scup? Voted 7-0 unanimously.
All right, so on to black sea bass. So what we're gonna do here is, we're gonna consider our part 3, commercial black sea bass management proposals and regs, concerning season allocation, starting possession limit. But then we're also going to go right into discussing the proposals relative to black sea bass for the aggregate program. These two things go hand in hand. It's hard to determine, if you don't know what the start is, how many days should we fish on, how many days should we fish on if you don't know what the start is. So you'll have it all together and feel free to discuss the general commercial specifications with relative to the aggregate program. So for part 3 here, we have 5 proposals concerning black sea bass. I will say 2 of the pairs of them are very similar, and this is one of those. This one would reallocate some of the percentages in each of the sub periods, and you can see there with the strike throughs, up to 35 for the May period, down to 20 for the July to August period. This proposal would collapse the 2 smaller fall periods into one and allocate 15%. It would also change the start of the May period to 100 pounds from 50 per vessel day. Similarly, the next proposal, proposal 2, the only change here, it does reallocate some of the allocations and collapse that fall period, except here you'll see the opening for all of those periods in the summer and early fall would start at 100 pounds per vessel day. This next couple pairs is also quite similar. So this one here does not touch any of the allocations or the seasons. It adjusts the openings up higher from 50 to 100 in the summer and 100 to 200 for the fall. And then the only difference between proposal 4 and proposal 3 is proposal 4 also takes into account the winter period and ups that start to 1,000 from 500. Next slide. So the last one is proposal 5 here. So this proposal takes into account that we are getting an increase in black sea bass next year. And what it does, it says how will it dictates how we would distribute those additional pounds. So the proposal there is to take the additional pounds and distribute them according to that 4th column there. So 10% into the winter period, 50% into that May to June period, 10% into the other periods going forward. It does not collapse those 2 fall periods either. So you also see that we have worked out how that would change the base allocations. So it would slightly alter those first 3 periods a little bit because we're putting additional pounds into those relative to the other seasons. Also, we've done a calculation of what we expect the poundage to be for each of those sub periods. I will note that this proposal also states that this new start for the May period would be either 75 or 100 pounds based on what the division thought would carry it through the entire year. And so now we'll actually go on and just discuss really quick the proposals we had relative to the aggregate program, summer fall aggregate program. So you'll see we've grayed out the ones relative to summer flounder here. So basically what we have for the sea bass proposals relative to aggregate is a division proposal and an industry proposal, which are similar, to amend the weekly possession limit from 5 times the daily limit to 7 times the daily limit. Right now we are at 5 times the daily limit. And next slide. And then additionally, we did have another proposal which considered that as well, up into 5 times. But we also had some proposals concerning our trigger when to close the aggregate program once we've reached a certain amount of quota. We have 2 proposals. In 2 of the proposals, it was suggested to modify that closure trigger from 80 to 85%. So instead of when we hit 80% of the quota, we would close the aggregate. In this case, we would wait to hit 85 and then close the aggregate. So that's all of our Black Sea Bass proposals.
So I just want to clarify, we're gonna vote on the daily possession limit, the 5 proposals first. And then we'll move on to the impact of aggregate. So when you're thinking about, I know you're all very excited to make motions tonight. When you're thinking about it, you're only doing one at a time. Okay. It's, so I'll go to Flounder.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. So I guess I'll stress that again, and John said it nicely. You know, these 2 elements of what you're seeing here in the Black Sea Bass Act are intricately related. So as you think about a if you decide to do 2 motions, if you vote on this element here, it could influence how you want to move forward with the aggregate. So just think, you know, as you're making motions and thinking about the first part, just think about the process of the aggregate. I'll start with the possession limits for Black Sea Bass. As John mentioned, you know, if there was substantive support for proposal 5, if you remind me, I have for myself. Thank you very much. So again, 70. So if this was one or something like this, you'd want to move forward with, you'd have to dictate or indicate for the May 1 starting period of 75 or 100. So as a just for consideration, and just by way of background, in our regulations, we'll be looking to promulgate the middle columns here of distribution of additional pounds, and poundage don't go in rank. Those are just for your readership and understanding. So you're looking at the base allocations primarily with the starting possession limits in the seasons. So there was, ultimately speaking, the division can manage all of these combinations. There was interest in trying to put, from the public comments, some of the more of the fish in the May 1 to June 30th slot based on price, which we discussed at length at the workshop. The one thing that came in during the comment or during the hearing was that may not have been captured in the workshop was we ended up closing Black Sea Bass earlier this year in November, I believe it was November 9th. And so there was questions or considerations of how to perhaps extend that season in the last period, sub-period 6. We last year got 25,000 pound transfer for Massachusetts, and catch rates were a bit lower, so we were able to extend all the way through the end of the year. We didn't have that luxury this year, high catch rates without additional poundage. So one of the comments or the proposals within the hearing in your e-packet was asking what the utility was of moving quota from season 1 into season 6. There wasn't a suggestion or proposal for what that would look like. Just by way of background, we did fully utilize the period 1 fish last year. We moved from 500 to 750, I believe, around early March for possession limits. So it wasn't at 500 the whole time, but we did fully utilize sub-period 1 quota during that period. So there wasn't a rollover, for example, but I guess the council could discuss whether any type of options thereafter. But I just wanted to emphasize the performance last year. I mean, historically, it's been discussed as bycatch in terms of fluke fishing, but the fish are being utilized and often the quota is being optimized in that period as it currently stands. I had some other questions, I guess, or comments on the aggregate, but I guess I'll hold that till your discussions on the aggregate. Does that make sense, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
The last thing I'll mention too is that I had a couple questions from folks about just gear types, in terms of the black sea bass fishery, how it's operating. And effectively, just in general, we see, effectively rounding here, like it's a third of the annual landings landed by trawl. Maybe a third or a little less than that by rod and reel, and then the rest is other gear, so gillnet, fish pot, lobster pot. So sea bass is very much so a multidisciplinary fishery. Just in terms of when you think about it, there are seasonal differences of when people are going, but one of those that everybody goes after.
Great. Is there any questions?
I'll say something perhaps similar to Greg's question here, that there's a lot of different options here, and proposal 5 seems to get a lot of positive public comments because of adding the additional poundage to a period that their price is really good. I was wondering, any of the council members, I guess, had opinions on that price there. I guess, Mike, you're probably the best one to ask for that.
Yeah, I would say May 1st through the middle of July is probably the best as far as summer pricing. In states like Mass and Jersey that will open up and have weekly aggregates, and that'll try to price down. And later in the fall, the price did come up a little bit. That was at late September to October 15th period, and then we were shut down like in November, like 4 or 5 days.
That was kind of the public comment proposal that Connor mentioned, is to move 10% from the spring to that fall period. So I guess it would be like 20% added to 10/16 to 12/31. And that would come away from January to April. Is that worth amending to pursue?
Yeah, I would say that. Plus, we have an increase of 160,000 in the state versus last year, so that should hopefully keep the fishery open year round this year. I think last year was an anomaly.
What percentage are you recommending from the first of the
It was, they wanted to take this 10% increase from that first period, add it to the last period. So I guess it would be 0 and then 20.
Okay.
That's what this, by Mr. Ford, this proposal here.
So we still don't have a motion, but I will go to Connor to weigh in on those thoughts.
Yep, I think as you know, it's hard to manage the periods when there's small allocations, so conceivably increasing the last period would be helpful in terms of not having it be a 10%, right? That might be helpful. I hate to be a broken record, but I do, when you're thinking about modifying proposal 5, just also make sure whether May 1 you'd like to start, where you want to start. So the status quo is 50 with a 75 to 100 range. Particularly in the next discussion on aggregate, that informs your decision as to what you want to do for an aggregate program. And by just the plant to see now for an aggregate, you can conceivably have it also different through the year. It could be more risk tolerant in periods we have higher quota, could be more risk averse when we have smaller sub periods, smaller quotas that you're managing on, just to try and make sure we don't close to the best of our ability. So
I'd like to see it start at 100. May 1. That way, as the price goes down for the season.
Can you, I'm sorry, Katie, would you mind just speaking a little louder so people on Zoom can hear you?
I'd like to see May 1 start at 100 pounds. As opposed to 75, that would be okay.
Okay, because we don't have any mention of it just yet, which is totally fine. So Travis,
Not a motion question.
Okay.
But is the, is 160,000 pounds, is that already, is that known, that's the number for next year?
I don't, you mean for the extra fish? Yeah, so it should be basically those new numbers, well, the sum of the difference of those two numbers of the strikeout and the added, that is coming, yeah,
Okay.
definitively, yeah.
okay, if there's no other comments or questions, I will entertain a motion.
We just go through the slide.
You want to go
one more time.
slides? Okay, that's fine.
Just
Yep.
want to make sure that we're all.
I have a question.
He did make one of the proposals, so maybe it could be clarified.
Okay, so we can, just really quick, so I'll give the one public comment and then we'll go through the proposals again.
It's, my proposal is number one, but with it, seeing as you're addressing proposal 5, are you gonna turn those numbers of pounds we came up with into a percentage for the future? Cause like, I'm just wondering how you apply this going forward with your new categories of distributing the additional pounds and base allocations. And so when they change the base allocations, is that like they changed around the last year's quota and then added these additional percents from our increase this year?
Sorry, yeah,
I find this a little confusing, which is why in my proposal, it does the same thing. I shifted fish from July and August and September into the 5/1 through 6/30 sub period. But I kind of kept the same format we've used for years, which is just using percentage of the annual allocation. I just find this slightly convoluting, but it's accomplishing the same thing I was trying to accomplish, which is more fish in May and June. At the workshop, the division had a really helpful slide where they overlaid the catch data throughout the year with the price, so it was really easy to see when the prices were good and were bad. I think it was really helpful when talking about proposals like this.
Can you go to the proposal, was it 1?
I made proposal 1. So yeah, I shifted a little bit of quota from that later summer period when Massachusetts and New Jersey open and we typically see lower prices. I also really like the 5/1 through 6/30 sub period because the fish are available geographically everywhere. They're up the bay, they're out front, they're accessible to the majority of fishermen at the time of year. So I think that's a good time of year to harvest our quota when it's at its most valuable. So like I said, 5 does accomplish the same goal I was attempting to. I just think this is a little simpler. And one more, in light of this falls closure, I would have no problem lowering that starting with possession limit in that last sub period. If it was like, say down to say 75 or something like that to try to get to the end of the year. But also we can hope that the extra quota we get this year does that as well.
I will entertain that.
Yeah, we gotta make sure that we don't get shut down at the end of the year. I mean, it's very heartbreaking for a lot of us, guys that fish out wide. Before the fish even showed up, they were gone. And we're all gonna be taking observers next year. On lots of guys, you're gonna have a lot of discards, so you might as well start planning on turning discards into landings. I mean, it's shut down completely. We don't even, before the fish even hit Block Island, it shut down. This year they stayed up in the bay, out front, 2 extra months. You know, so I mean, that's another thing that I understand, shifting all the fish up forward. You're gonna chew up the quota real quick in the beginning and leave the rest of the year for stragglers coming down to the end, and then by the time they hit Block Island, they're gone. We're shut off. Now I had an observer with me 2 days ago, bring home my lobs again. I threw over 500 jumbo sea bass in front of it. 500 of them. I would have stocked more in sea bass for the day than I did with lobsters. So I mean, we really have to make sure it doesn't get shut down in that time of year.
Great.
That's just what I'm thinking about. That number 5 is, after we went through the thing, the number 5 one came in later on, and Connor spoke with Dave Warden quite a bit on how we went around with it. And that's why I honestly think everyone kind of gets a little fair crack at the apple. And not having it open up, having another sub period instead of making that such a big sub period down there. So when it shuts off again, we have at least another chance of it opening again. Now we have nothing for the rest of the year.
Right, okay. Okay, so I won't entertain any other further public comments, we've had a few comments. Dave, I'll go to you and then I will go to Connor.
I was just wondering if there is management benefit to having more or less of these sub periods, but I think. Kind of answered less, more sub periods gives you more flexibility.
Yes, the sub periods historically have been dictated by interest from the fishery of trying to manage the different periods. The one benefit, I suppose, is that when you have multiple periods, it ensures that you don't run through all the fish really fast. And then there's at least some, even if there is a closure, you're gonna reopen. So that's kind of the one benefit. It does make it hard when you're managing small quotas. It's kind of a similar thing we see with red bass, like not the same exact poundage, but it's just hard when you're managing fish over X days and with the amount of effort. So that's I think that answers your question, Dave. You could conceivably you can collapse them, you can expand them, you could do multiple things. Our general recommendation has always been do not have a period with less than 10% of the quota, because it will be incredibly challenging to track. Somewhat of a rule of thumb for us. And then just really quickly, more from a logistical point to Kenny's question, we don't plan to use poundage in reg. You know, that was made by the proposer to help people visualize how much fish we're talking about. The percentages are the resulting percentages after the increase in quota. So like it's 18 there for period 1, but that's including the 15,000 extra pounds. It's just now its contribution relative to the whole is dropped because we disproportionately added fish into other periods.
Yeah, so that's so that's like the new percentages that you have.
Exactly. So we would, if the council took this 18, 30, 22, 10, 10, 10 would be what goes into regulation with the associated possession limits. If there was a modification tonight based on that, we would probably not do them right now. We would do it after tonight and then promulgate those in regulation.
So, with that being said, we do have a lot more to get through. Is there any further commentary or questions? Otherwise, I can entertain a motion. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, really quick. Mike, did you want to go through the proposals one more time? Like the proposals?
We can just go through them real quick,
Okay.
just so we can deal real quick. All right, good.
Now I can.
Madam Chair, I'd like to, move, passage of proposal 5 with, the 100, per, pound per vessel per day in the May, June.
Made by Mike Rice for proposal 5 with 100 pounds starting possession limit. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dave Bethany. So I'll go out to Connor to kind of just elaborate and clarify anything.
Yeah, and mainly for the division's edification, like, so there was a discussion just now that discussed further movement of fish from a period of the fall to ensure we don't close. Is that, the way I understood the motion you made, it was proposal 5 with the 100, so no additional fish moved from any period to the fall, and that's how you, okay.
All right, is there any? Do you guys want to deliberate?
Yeah, that'd be fine as far as we're allocated.
Is there any further commentary, deliberation? All right. Normally we don't, but I'll let it slide, but go ahead.
Oh, I just want, I'm Russell out of Newport and I support proposal 5, you know, we all want to see more fish when the price is high, it opens up again in May. But I'm also with Patrick and the closing of it early November was also brutal as well. So we all want to see more fish when they're available and when the price is high, but we also like a balancing act so that we still can catch the fish in the sub period.
Great. All right, so if there's no other commentary, are you guys ready for the question? All those in favor to recommend the adoption of proposal 5 with a starting possession limit of 100 pounds per vessel per day in the May 1 to June 30 sub period, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. All those opposed? 1 opposed. The motion passes. All right, so now I believe we're going on to Black Sea Bass, the aggregate program.
So, John kind of gave you the background. I'll kind of just follow up with a couple of quick comments for you. Indulge me. The first is that just from a logistical standpoint regarding the trigger, just I hope that we'll be discussing a similar thing for summer flounders. This is the proposal that we received for triggers came in for both. If you vote for Black Sea Bass to have a change in trigger from 80 to 85 or something, you could conceivably not want the same trigger for fluke. So I might just give some of yourself some flexibility specifying for Black Sea Bass. That way you have the option to discuss it for summer flounder as you'd like. Regarding just the aggregate proposal, the division did support going from 5 to 7. That was under the assumption that we were having status quo starting possession limits. Many of them have increased now, so I don't have all the projections as to how long that would be or how many people will now enter the program. But you know, we are very, very much supportive of the aggregate. We can see many of the benefits to it. We hope it continues. You know, I think there is of course risk. It's up to some degree in how we want to manage it in terms of 5 for 7 or 6 or whatever you all so choose to do tonight. I think there's also an opportunity to think about the multiplier or the X factor, if you will, with periods. So you can imagine, you know, smaller sub periods with on top of an aggregate are slightly more challenging than when you have more fish to work with in terms of managing the quotas. So conceivably the council could suggest you could think about either a static one or one maybe in different periods. Like recommendations or discussions, we can chat about that further, but we could conceivably have different multipliers or things throughout the season. You know, I think that ultimately for the program, we had 48 applicants this past year to participate for Black Sea Bass. The question always comes up, who else will join? Is there other people who maybe want to do it? We do have lobster. The federal lobster fleet is now also getting VMS per ASMFC Fisheries Management Plan regulations. So conceivably, those who didn't do it before because they didn't have a VMS unit may now want to, or conceivably could, because it is open access. We did have 13 of those folks at the 80 some odd federally permitted guys we have in this already. So when you think about added effort, it's not 1-to-1, but you know, there'll be somewhere like 60 some odd folks who already have now got units for the new Fisheries Management Plan rule. So there could be more like 80 something by the time May 1 rolls around. So it's not clear if those people will all move into sea bass, but they're one group that I could see maybe now utilizing the program and previously not because of the VMS requirements. So just food for thought, and they may not be fishing at the same time. The areas where sea bass are fishing different, you know, this is in regards to the rest, in relation to the rest of the fleet. So, you know, I perceive that more people will enter this year. I don't know how many, but that's kind of the percent of lobster folks who will have the unit. So, yeah, I think those are my major points.
Is there any questions for Connor or about the proposals for the aggregate program? and commentary. Okay, so Connor, while I have a second, we can, as a council, we can change the weekly possession limit from 5 to 7 times the daily limit across the board.
Yeah, I think in general, you can change the daily limit, the multiplier.
Sorry.
Yeah, by season or
By season.
May 1 through December 31st.
Or you can do it the way that it was broken up in the last chart that we just voted on.
Yeah, I wouldn't, my personal thought would be, I wouldn't go all over the place, crazy, for enforcement's sake, as well as accounting,
Yeah.
trying to keep track and make it easier. One of the thoughts I was thinking about, not having asked industry is it help to have, 7 in that early period and see how that market and price holds with 7 times and then go back to 5 thereafter under the shorter periods. But we could, I guess status quo would be 5 days worth of fish in a week. With that perceived 2-day tax or.
Yeah, and then the other option is to either status quo 80% for the trigger.
Correct, right, and it is worth noting that it's hard triggers on small periods because you can go from. Like based on reporting, you can go from like you're 70% of the way there and then all of a sudden you're 95. Just when the fish come in and when the reports come in, so sometimes people say, why didn't you close it? It's like, well. When we got to this, we already now know when we have to close the period, let alone shut the aggregate down.
So there's a chance of it being closed even sooner than the trigger, just based on reporting.
Or us not being, yes, based on reporting, we wouldn't be able to notify the trigger and thus the aggregate actually going within the daily possession limit ensuing closure of the aggregate. It's just harder when you're dealing with smaller quotas, shorter periods, and high effort in those seasons as the fish are moving from inshore off to the shelf.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, the division proposal and the industry proposal for the multiplier were the same, the trigger change.
We proposed 7. We were admittedly at that time, the daily possession limit was 50 pounds. So we're thinking 250. So now the proposal, for example, some of those periods are 100.
Yeah.
Right, so now you have just like in the May 1. So the question is,
What does that look like?
yeah,
Right.
ultimately, but
So I've
just food
stalled.
for thought, yeah.
I've stalled a little bit. Is there any other questions, or I can entertain a motion?
My last comment is just that we do support the aggregate. We find that many of the benefits are being achieved from it. So I hope that council considers.
Travis?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we, increase the weekly possession limit to 7 times the daily limit for the entire season. And that we modify the aggregate to 85% for the trigger.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Mike Roderick. All right, is there any commentary or questions at the moment? Otherwise, I'll go to front.
Just confirming that trigger is specific to CVAS.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
I guess, newbie question here, so the way this was posted, there was 5 proposals about the aggregate program. They both had stuff about sea bass and summer flounder, so now we're breaking this apart, and we don't have to vote on as they were presented, paired.
Yes, so I can speak to that about kind of noticing and rules. When we go out to notice, we can put something on there to kind of get the discussion going, have people comment on it, but it's still within the scope of what was noticed. Changing those numbers within that scope doesn't violate the rules. The APA.
And thanks, Dave, for that. It's a good question, because by way of background, what we did last spring, when the pilot ended and we looked to promulgate this, it was quite a bear to get all of it in at once. And there's a lot of elements of the program that, in terms of reporting, violations, and all types of the VMS requirements that we were working through all at once. What we found that for the last time we went through this is that for ease in understanding the programs, it's easiest to speak to each species individually as we go through. But then another thing we got a lot of feedback on too was, we were in this, because it was a pilot program, we were offset, we were dealing with commercial specs, blue Scup lights, this aggregate program, kind of not in the same cycle. We've now gotten to a point with part of the program of the pilot, now part of our management plan, we can discuss them in one spell swoop at one time of the year, so no decision is being done by itself, even though it's highly dependent on what we did made 6 months ago, for example. So hopefully it's a little more streamlined.
Is there any other commentary or question? Are you guys ready for the vote? All right, all those in favor to recommend the director the adoption of a weekly possession limit of 7 times the daily limit and an aggregate closure trigger of 85% for the summer fall aggregate program for black sea bass, please raise your hand. For those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. All those opposed? 1 opposed. Motion passes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, on to summer flounder. So we only have one proposal for part 3 here. That's our division proposal. So we are proposing to change the start of the May to September sub period from 300 down to 200 a day. But we do have some other considerations like sea bass that we'll go through all at once, just to make sure people are apprised of what all the proposals are. So we have another proposal from the division, and this is to change the maximum amount of the summer flounder that vessels without a summer flounder exemption certificate are authorized to possess during the specified time period, either day or week, from 200 to 300 pounds per day. I will say there's a little bit of confusion about this at the workshop and the hearing. To be clear, this has nothing to do with how we start any period or what the possession limits could or may be. This is just, if you have a summer flounder exemption certificate, in the example down here, you'll see, so if you have one and the limit was 500 pounds per vessel day, if you have a certificate, you can have that 500 pounds. If you don't have the certificate, you're limited to currently 200, we're proposing to go up to 300. So that does tie in with aggregate programs, as you'll see with the next proposals concerning the fluke cert. It does tie into the aggregate quite a bit, actually. So next slide. So these are the proposals for proposals for the aggregate program relative to summer flounder. So right now, summer flounder is not in the aggregate program. We have several proposals, both division and industry proposals have advocated for adding summer flounder to the as an authorized species into the aggregate program like it was for the pilot, and to have that weekly possession limit be 7 times the daily limit. So that would be the multiplier. We have had some other proposals as well relative to summer flounder, an industry proposal, which would add summer flounder in, but soften the requirement for a summer flounder exemption certificate. You would not need a certificate to participate, although I would point out you don't need one now to participate, but you won't be bound by those summer flounder certificate possession limit restrictions. Instead, this proposal would have a weekly possession limit, change the multipliers, whether or not you have a fluke cert. So if you have a summer flounder fluke certificate, you can have 7 times the daily limit. This proposal, if you did not have a summer flounder exemption certificate, you'd be allowed 5 times the daily limit. So a little nod that, that the fluke certs people with them do fish at a higher effort. They get the 7 times. If you don't, you're not as limited as you would be in the other proposals. You would get 5 times a day. Fine. We have had 2 other proposals with summer flounder considerations. Once again, proposal 4 advocates to add it into the program, but also advocates to change the closure trigger from 80 to 85%, as does proposal 5 as well. So once again, this would be like sea bass currently The trigger applies to both, just you want to specify whether it was sea bass or something.
So we are going to, just to make sure you guys are all clarified, we're gonna start with the. You go back. We're gonna start with the possession limit. Just for summer flounder here. Starting possession limit, then we're gonna move to the exemption certificate. Did I get that right? And then then we have the aggregate program. So 3 different votes, but they all impact one another. Okay. So on this first proposal, is there any commentary, or on this first one, with the starting possession limit, is there any commentary or questions? Otherwise, I will go to the division. Go ahead, Connie.
Yeah, so, in terms of 300 versus 200, the division doesn't have a strong stance. We can, in season, modify possession limits. 200 is probably a bit more, I guess, prudent in the context of the reduction of blue quota we're going to see. There's quite a bit of consternation amongst some members of the industry with 300 last year, so starting at 200 may be more appropriate, though I'll speak to that more in the aggregate discussion. I did just want to notify let folks know too that we did get a proposal to change the starting possession limit for season 1, with the winter 1 period. That did not go up to notice because it was not discussed at the workshop. So we can't vote on that tonight, but we can modify that in season as part of our possession limits. So the division got the comment, understands it. We can't promulgate regulations to change 4,000 at this time, but we will, the comment we did receive on that, we will use that to advise us as we start early next year for winter 1, summer 5. I just want to be transparent on that.
Any further questions? Okay, go ahead.
Is that something you can share or not?
What's that?
Are you able to share what the comment was or how that would impact?
Yeah, it's in the e-packet. I think it was 3,000 start for winter 1. So in a normal process, we'd get the comment, we'd go to notice, we'd have 3 versus 4,000. We didn't get it. We got it in the public comment period, but it wasn't noticed, so we can't change it. So yeah, so but the division's been advised that, and we'll take it under consideration when we start early next year.
Any other questions or comment? Otherwise, I can entertain the motions. Rhode?
I'd like to make a motion to accept proposal 1 for the start of the 2024 summer flounder season.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Travis Barrow. He gets you every time, Andy. Every time he gets you. Is there any other further commentary? Are you guys ready for the question? All right, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 1 for commercial summer flounder management and propose, all raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 voted unanimously. Okay, so then on to the exemption. And then I'll just go back to the division to kind of reiterate or have you guys some nuance to this as well.
Yeah, I might, so yeah, well, we can, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, speak to this and the ag, because these ones particularly are handcuffed in my opinion, so that's okay. So I guess I'll just, by way of background, to refresh the folks' mind from memory, when you all met in April last year, there was no, we had the pilot summer flounder and black sea bass. You voted to defer decision on summer flounder until a later time, which is now effectively. So we had summer flounder aggregate program for 3 or 4 years. We effectively took a pause this year from May 1 till now, and we're bringing it back before you for consideration as we have done with sea bass. Just to, be forthright, the division is strongly supportive of summer flounder aggregate. There is, I understand the challenges when discussing it for the summer. At a minimum, we need it. It would be advisable. We would advise to use it in the fall at a minimum. To the degree of which we have summer flounder quota utilization issues at certain times of the year, having the aggregate program in the fall would allow us to make sure we do use all of our quota. And at times of the year when it's particularly challenging to catch the fish as they're moving offshore, the increased flexibility is at this point seemingly required based on how fast we're using the fish now. As you know, by way of background or as an example, I think we had roughly 223,000 pounds from the summer period roll over into the fall. So when you think about what is 29% of the fall quota moving into, or summer quota moving into the fall, it's just more fish at the fall than we're hoping to catch in terms of helping Rhode Island with utilizing its commercial quota and ultimately in future quota conversations amongst the states in terms of making sure we are using what we have and further our discussions in that framework. So what we've seen in this past year with not an aggregate program at all, summer flounders multiple times raising the possession limit to try and meet it at daily limits that are not achievable in the fashion that we hope, resulted in rollover. So when thinking about the challenges of what that means for quota utilization, you can get a sense that it's been challenging without it. So that's, you know, there's discussions about, you know, user conflict or whatever it may be in the summer. So I wanted to just be forthright in talking about the fall and hope that at a minimum you would consider the program being continued in the fall with at a 7-day limit for summer flounder. There is an intricate tie here to the exemption certificate, which you see in your public comment, and you also see on the slides before you tonight. In my mind, the interaction between requiring the cert or not, as well as the exemption cert limit, kind of are two ways of solving the same type of issue. As a division, we've heard longstanding that to some degree, the fluke exemption certificate is important. Do not get rid of it. And so all of our programs now require it per that recommendation. We understand the challenges of day boats and others from being able to actually take advantage of such a program if you're capped at 200. So we're trying to figure out if we raise the limit, would that help allow people to better utilize the program? So that's where 300 came from. Furthermore, the 300 specifically came from by looking at the pilot aggregate data from those who participated in the final year of the program, but did not have a fluke certificate, but were able to do it as part of an exemption as a special program. 77% of those trips were less than 300 pounds landed, so we thought that made sense. That at 300, if you were to go to 400, that's 81%. So we kind of start to taper off in terms of the trips that would then be allowed here. The elephant in the room on that is all that many of these trips are dictated by the squid. So you see a lot of trips at 100 pounds because of the small mesh requirements for that. In a year when squid's not here, how does that change? That's unclear. But that's really what we have from the data thus far for the program. Yeah, I think so. We as a division have decided to, you know, operate by altering the possession limits for the certificate as opposed to exempting those from an exemption certainty, which is what the other proposal does, but they achieve similar things under the general principle that, you know, in this model, the certificate still holds value, as has been stressed to us by members of the fishing industry, particularly in a year where in the last year when we didn't have this program, people were buying and selling certs to try and position themselves to be able to operate in one in the future. So yeah, I think those are the bulk of my comments, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Connor. So, what you're saying about rolling over the quota into the fall, do you still think that's going to be an issue with the 40% projected cuts that are going on? And then, if so, without an aggregate program, we could be putting ourselves in a situation where we're potentially causing regulatory discards and high grading at the same time as we're getting quota cut.
Yeah, so it's a good question. hard to know exactly how they'll interplay. I do still think that aggregate would be valuable even in a reduction of quota, so. Because even if you think about 29%, I think the final, is it 38% correct for the final reduction? In commercial quota?
It's near 40, I don't remember exactly.
Okay, so, thank you, sorry. So yeah, just trying to, when you think about what we did not optimize, it's pretty close, and that's also when we ramped up several times in the summer. So that's us trying to incentivize catching. And you could, there's other ways to do it. I think one of the proposals highlighted one of the tools you could use to try and have, you know, different levels of aggregate, so 5 or 7 days as an example. One might even argue that with less fish, to be more nimble and under smaller possession limits, it's important to have an aggregate, you know, when it's less lucrative to try and make sure margins are obtained. But I still think that even in at a minimum in the fall, it provides a fail safe for us to utilize the quota.
Great.
Connor, it seems like there's one group of commercial fishermen that are adamantly opposed to it based on the public comment. Is there anything that can be done to offset their frustration? I assume it's the rod and reel group guy. There was, of all the proposals tonight, this one clearly had the most people against it. In the public comment.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to speak for folks, but you know, ultimately, I think there's historically, well, looking back to last year's discussion, I'll put it that way. There was discussion regarding summer utilization and fear that boats that have certs that are larger and can operate quicker might utilize the bulk of the fish even faster than smaller boats that weren't in the aggregate program. Not necessarily my perspective, that's just the discussion that was held. You know, one of the things we did know is that anybody can join the aggregate. Like it's not specific to a certain group, sea bass or for that matter. We have many aggregate programs, other aggregate programs that are operating already, not limited access. So it's similar in that nature. And I perceive that angst being primarily in the summer, not so much in the fall, which is another reason why I thought that, or the division thought that at a minimum, the fall would pose it. I still think there's benefits to the summer, quite frankly. We just saw it, we just rolled over 29% of the summer quota into this fall period with no aggregate program. So it certainly makes it more challenging for us. We gotta in-season manage both those with and without weekly possession limits, so.
Right, just so you know, most of that fish that's caught in the summer period is caught south of Nantucket, south of the Vineyard, south of Long Island, which doesn't really impact any of our beaches along the southern coast with the large drag, as Connor was saying.
So then, just thinking about the discussion here, that in my mind is a couple of elements to consider. You know, first is depending on how you vote or how you do your voting order of operations. Like, do you want a program or not? Do you want the whole period, part of the period? Do you want, and then how do you want to treat the certificate? You know, do you want to still require it, but then increase the certificate limit? Or do you want to evaluate, you know, the certificate requirements this summer for the aggregate program?
Thank you very much.
Okay, I can entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the aggregate program starting May 1st and December 31st annually.
Okay.
And do you want to just continue with the 2 and the 300 pump option, or just we're gonna go one at a time?
I think it actually would be better, like I hear where you're headed, but it actually might be better to vote on this first, and then we can go switch to the aggregate next, just because that's how it was on the agenda and that's how it's kind of been flowing. So I can entertain a motion on the exemption certificate first, and then we can transition over to the aggregate program. So
So you want to start with the exemption first, maybe with the 2 to 300 pounds. Okay. Make a motion that we keep, the summer flounder exemptions, we get 200 pounds, only because of the decrease in the total tax this year. It's something that we should revisit maybe next year if there's an increase.
We recommend status quo.
Status quo.
Is there a second? Seconded by Greg Murphy. All right, I will go to Connor to weigh in. Status quo.
Yeah, it kind of, you've already heard me talk a lot, so I'll probably won't belabor it. You know, this is the number of ways to operate with this. These things are handcuffed, they go hand in hand, so how do you treat? You know, theoretically, there are people who may not be in a aggregate and have a preference on the cert, but they are all, for the purposes of the discussion here, they're pretty much tied together in terms of how you want to operate, so.
That makes sense, okay. Is there any further commentary on just the exemption certificate at this time? All those in favor, if you're ready for the question, all those in favor of the adoption of status quo for the exemption certificate program as proposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. So 6 in favor, all those opposed? 1 opposed, motion passes. So then we are going to transition over to the aggregate program. And I can, since we've talked about this at length, I can entertain another motion. Go ahead.
Make a motion that we accept May 1st to December 31st, starting 2024 for the summer flounder aggregate program with a weekly possession limit of 7 times and modify fish trigger to 85%.
Do I have a second?
With the 7 to 5 days, I would do, you need the exemption for that, or not the exemption?
The motion as stated, please make it again, Mike.
Every 7 days, with or without the exemption.
Oh, let's go with that, okay, I just want to make sure, you get it clear.
So can you restate your motion really quick?
Sure. Start off with the May 1st, December 31st, adoption of the summer fall aggregate with a weekly possession limit of 7 times the daily limit. And the exemption certificate is not required
Okay, and then the aggregate closure,
at 85%.
okay, so that is the motion made. I do not have a second. Do I have one? Yes, all the way. Seconded by Travis Barrow. All right. So is there, let's start with some discussion. Looks like there's some contemplating happening.
Clarify question?
Yeah.
Not sure. So just to clarify, Mike, so from the division perspective, the exemption of the exemption, that then effectively, that's, I'm assuming that's for the whole period, May 1 through the 31st.
Correct.
And so the utility of the search is now primarily the winter. Is that correct? Understand it then?
Correct.
Is there any additional language that needs to be contemplated to make this effective? I just want to make sure this is the actual motion that Mike you're proposing.
Yes. I just want everybody to know too that it'd be a disservice to the industry not to have it start in the summer. Only reason being is a lot of discards when our guys are fishing in the summer.
Commentary? Question?
I was actually thinking of more, like, I seconded it just to get the conversation going, but I was actually thinking more like 7X on the aggregate instead. But rather than having this in the summer period. Everybody else has any commentary or thoughts on it, just, I might just say like, you know, we want to for the whole time, so.
Yeah.
It does, again, it doesn't impact any of the small, I don't like to call anybody a small rod and reel fishery. It doesn't impact anybody except us just having a lot of discards throwing fish over. And again, rolling over 22% of the fall doesn't make sense. When you can't, you know, then we keep raising the limits, so the guys on the beach can't catch the fish anyway. So it's just, it's kind of disheartening to see all the fish being thrown over, it's not harvesting the fish in that period, that's a lot of dollars.
And Madam Chair, just to clarify too, all the rules for this would stay the same. So like for this would, in terms of the summer, fall aggregate program, so you need a VMS unit, same types of penalties and such, so, you know, just clarifying.
So to clarify a question, so this is the division proposal, but then there's a couple extra things added here about the closure trigger changing and the summer flounder exemption not being required. So I know you went through this, but can you tell me what happens when the summer flounder exemption is not required? How is that different from how it is now?
Yep, so, effectively, our proposal was to make the cert required, but increase the limit. So the probability of you actually being impeded on a daily trip is smaller. So, you know, like right now, let's just say the possession limit was 100 pounds a day. And you didn't have the fluke cert, but you were in the program, you'd be capped at 200 pounds a day no matter what. Doesn't matter if you ran 300 or whatever, you could only land 200. What this now does is in the summertime, it doesn't, this proposal exempts you from needing that cert to go above from exceeding 200 pounds. So now you could catch 300, 400, whatever it might be.
You would opt into the
If you opt into the
aggregate program,
program, which requires these other contingencies. But yes. And so our proposal, given the longstanding discussion we've heard about the value of the certs and the interest in trying to keep those as part of the management program value, not just the winter, but summer and fall. Ours was to try and say they still exist, you still need one, but the cap is now much higher of what you can operate, not much. The cap is higher now what you can operate in, which for our data was indicating that 77% of the trips for those who could have gone higher didn't, because they didn't catch more than 300. So this was another, it's like two different ways to skin a cat, but one exempts the need for a cert, one maintains it but raises the bar.
All right, if there's no other questions or commentary, I'm gonna ask the question. All right, all those in favor of, bear with me, everyone, recommending to the director the adoption of the following for the summer fall aggregate program, adding summer flounder from May 1 to December 31st as an authorized species, having a summer flounder weekly possession limit of 7 times the daily limit, and an aggregate closure trigger of 85%, and summer flounder exemption certificate is not required. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. All those opposed? 1 opposed. Motion passes. That, I believe, concludes our publicly noticed items. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong, Division.
I believe so.
And so we'll move on to 2 other items. Hang in there with me. We need to discuss the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council membership. And I'm gonna turn it over to Connor right away, but I just want, just as a formality for chair, I do want to thank all of you for your continued participation and time and effort that you're putting into this. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Connor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, we have 2 members who are terming out April 2024. So that would be Travis and Dr. Price. So, if I'm wrong on that, definitely let's me. But that's what I'm going to say. As part of that, we will be going through, we were going to be going through our application process here in the winter. Ideally, we would be looking to post the listserv out later this week or next week, and then hopefully have like a January 15th deadline to solicit folks. So we'll do our homework on pounding the pavement to find people, and if you have good people. We hope you recommend them. You should get all the announcements in the listserv. Also, I wanted, many of you know, and I've spoken to you about this, but obviously Jason Jarvis also elected to resign from the Rhode Island Fisheries Council. So we not only will be looking to fill the two vacancies from the terms being ending, but we'll also be looking to fill Jason's seat. So that's at minimum a recreational, conservation / science, and a commercial council. So you know, my hope ultimately for Travis and Mike is that we'll have a pretty substantive meeting at the very beginning of April. So my hope is you can help usher us through that meeting before, even if we have people lined up, just to help build continuity and give folks a chance to see how it live before they jump right in. That'll be for the commercial and recreation topics, but yeah, and then we'll be looking for Jason's seat. So, and I'm happy to speak to that if any would like to chat further afterwards, but I want to thank Jason for his time on the council. I learned a lot from him, and I think he was providing valuable perspectives from a different corner of Rhode Island, which I think benefited the council. And obviously, of course, Travis and Mike, we'll likely see you in April. We'll see you in April. Want to, of course, then thank you for your time thus far. And if you have any questions on membership, happy to answer those as well.
And then finally, if there's any other matters.
Just quick, I would say we had, sorry.
No.
There was a nice ceremony on Saturday, I never danced it, some of the folks were there. I remember Stephen Dearest, so those who showed up, thank you, it was a nice event. Everybody did a nice job, making that happen, so. Thank you.
And I have one comment from Mr. Patrick.
Yeah, I know we're gonna bring up the division, it sounds like a broken record, but. Are we gonna eventually do the thing about placing the vessels? Per person, so you can have a double limit, so a normal person can. Run his 2 vessels that he owns without having to hire a captain. Can we get a little push from you guys to get a little bias out or anything like that? Overnight, we got pretty much sealed the deal by changing those regulations. By the clarifications. By one person, daily possession owned by one person. Where we're going down the road of places with vessel. Right, where we are going down that road, some of that language is gonna change. Because what if the guy is fishing his boat in federal waters under his his federal permits and his state boats inside state water that he put his license on. How's he gonna be able to manage?
So I'm going to.
I know it's gonna go to Connor.
I'm gonna go to Connor, but I might actually, unless the council is interested in the discussion, we can also do this offline. But Connor, do you want to speak briefly to it?
Yeah, we can chat.
Yeah, I know, I just like to bring the fire, get the ball rolling, and I think we, think of the council, you guys are doing a good job. I think that, we gotta, really think about the scoop certificate and see if we can reallocate some or something, it's a lot of time put into that. Kind of wrong, but. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Is there any objection, or is there any other matters? Is there any objection to adjourning? All those in favor, raise your hand. Gentlemen, are you opposed to adjourning? All in favor, the meeting is adjourned.